Hello students, and welcome to our video about the Men in Black. If you are interested in this, but also more stuff about conspiracies and a conspiracy discussion, I do recommend the live stream. It's about 2 hours long. You don't need to watch anything, so if you guys like listening to stuff in the background while you're doing your errands or chores, I do recommend giving it a listen. So the Men in Black as a conspiracy is not the same as the Men in Black the movie. First of all, it predates the movie. But the other thing is that the movie was only very, very loosely inspired by this concept of the Men in Black conspiracy. The only similarities between the movie and the conspiracy would be that people are dressed very similarly, and it's two people that tend to go and encounter civilians. They show up after some kind of alien interaction, and possibly work for the government. That's it. Those are the only similarities there. The idea of that like flashing device that erases your memory, that's for the movie. The idea of like aliens that immigrate to Earth, that's part of the movie. That's not part of the conspiracy theory. So if we actually check out just the Wikipedia page, we see that it starts with this idea of ufology, but there is some reference to it in folklore. If you actually go to this section of the book that is referenced here, The Gods Have Landed, it does make reference to the Men in Black as they kind of show up after UFO encounters, which we'll talk about, and they referenced how it seems a bit similar to people in the past that have claimed to encounter monsters and then had some sort of mysterious person showing up and trying to quiet them or discuss this with them that predates any concept of UFOs, at least in modern culture. So UFOs and the Men in Black, how are they related? Basically, this idea is that anytime you have an interaction with a UFO and you start discussing it publicly. So, of course, in the 1950s and 60s, we're not talking like posting it on Reddit or Discord. We're talking about writing about it in a book or getting written about in your local newspaper. People who had that happen also had reported that there were two people that would show up to their house after the story had gotten out and more people were interested in it, and told them that they need to keep it quiet. It was sort of a threat, basically. They felt threatened. The Men in Black I think this might be a good picture of this to represent how they've been described. The idea of the Men in Black, it's one of three options. One is that they could be related to Satan or demons in some way. The other one is that they are humans that are just government workers and they want you to not talk about UFO stuff. And the other one, which a lot of people do believe because of their described appearance, and by a lot of people I mean relative to the conspiracy theorist believers, it's this idea that they are actually some type of alien or artificial intelligence that is masquerading as a human but not doing a very good job of it. As we can see here from this image, they do not have eyebrows, and I know you can't really tell from this picture, but they are not supposed to have any hair on their faces at all. So that includes their eyebrows, hair on top of their heads, and also eyelashes. So they are pretty similar in height, and they look pretty similar, which again is different from the movie where the guys had facial hair, they had hair on their heads, and they did look rather different from each other. So the Men in Black are somebody that's gonna threaten you, basically. You guys can learn a lot more about them from other videos out there. I didn't want to just make this a rehashing of stuff that you could find in other videos. Instead, I want to talk to you about this concept that there would be people coming to silence you because of something that you're saying, and that the government is trying to silence you because of something that you're saying. The reason that I am talking about this is because I used to work for the government, not NASA, I wish, but I was actually a drafter, and I also had worked in the Marines. And for a while, it wasn't my MOS, which is your military job by training, but I did work in intelligence for a while as well. So I feel like I have some of a background to discuss this. When I heard about the Men in Black as a conspiracy theory, I thought, who would waste their time? That's the first thought that I had. I feel like when civilians think about government workers, they have this idea in their head that would be similar to how children think about adults. And I don't mean to say that the average civilian is immature, like a child is immature, not like that. But instead, a child perceives an adult as someone who has everything together. There's an air of perfection around them. They have all the answers. They know everything going on. And then once that child becomes an adult, they realize, oh my gosh, adults are just pretty clueless and kind of just, feeling things out, making all sorts of mistakes and having a lot of unresolved issues from their childhood, and they might continue to be unresolved, and they never mature past a certain point for some adults as well. They don't seem to be these perfect or really amazing beings that we thought they would be when we were kids. And that's sort of what I found out when I started working for the government. I thought, okay, government, everything's on point. This is going to be super regimented and regulated and all this other stuff. And it turns out, no, it's just a bunch of adults that just kind of feeling it out. Some people show up to work that day and they're just going to wait out the clock by pretending to take care of things away from their desk, and they don't actually do any work that day. There's other times when you just see something, you could take care of it, but you know what? Honestly, you just don't care enough to do it. It's just the same as any other job. The government jobs will not care about this. And one of the ways that I described it in the live stream was as if you worked at Taco Bell and somebody left you a negative review on Yelp or some other restaurant reviewing thing. You, as the Taco Bell employee, just a regular cook or cash register person, you're not going to go take it upon yourself to leave your house or leave the work, and they're not going to send you to do this, to find the person who wrote the negative review and to talk about them and threaten them and all this other stuff. And that actually could negatively affect your business. You could eventually lose your job if that Taco Bell shuts down because enough people had written negative things as their online review. So that actually could really impact you having these negative reviews. And even in that case, you don't hunt them down and tell them to silence. Even more so, the federal government or state government or whatever large government or even a small scale government is not going to send people out to some tiny house somewhere and say, hey, that thing that you wrote that you only got like 7 upvotes on Reddit, yeah, we're gonna tell you to be quiet, otherwise we're gonna threaten to kill you. That's just nothing that nobody's gonna do. They just don't care. The problem with believing in conspiracy theories and being somebody who is a conspiracy theorist is that you lose any type of authority in the general discussion. So if somebody is having a discussion in an open forum, whether that is in person or online, as soon as somebody who comes in and starts talking about conspiracy theories or a conspiracy theory as if it was true, most of the time people will immediately say, you're obviously, not believing in reality. You obviously are brainwashed, or you just kind of buy into everything. You're not skeptical, you're uneducated, whatever. They'll say all these really negative things about the person, which may not be true. The conspiracy might actually be a true conspiracy, but because that person is so negatively perceived by the general public, no one's going to listen to them. Is that the person that the government is going to waste time on? No, they just don't care. You can say whatever you want, the government's just not going to care. And the other problem too is that they tell people that when the person is talking about this encounter with the Men in Black, they talk about feeling very scared. They felt their life was threatened. They don't want to say anything because, well, maybe my life isn't important, but, my kids, my spouse, my parents, and whatever, I don't want them to be negatively impacted. I don't want them to be killed, blah, blah, blah. But they share this with the reader or the listener in videos, in posts, in books, in newspaper articles. And they just openly share this. So if you were really that scared that the government or big government or the men in black are really going to come and just slaughter your family, why are you speaking about it so openly? And some people say, well, it protects them this way, because if they say the government's going to kill me for bringing it up and then they die, then that will prove that they were right and that the government is there, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is that if the government wants to kill you, they don't even need to make it look like a suicide. They can just pay off the local detective or pay off the local coroner to write it down that it was a suicide or mysterious circumstance or something that, or natural circumstances, sorry, not mysterious circumstances. They could literally put two rounds in the back of your skull and say, oh yes, this person died from a heart attack, and just have them write that down. They don't even have to do any of the work to make it look like it's a fake suicide or something. They don't have to even pretend to do any of that work. They just need to pay somebody off. This is not something that is what they're going to waste their time with. And again, these are people. Do you want to go kill somebody because they said a thing about another thing that you're kind of associated with working with? No, nobody wants to do that. So not only, I mean, think about that. If I was asked to do that, I would immediately try to report it. I would wear, some kind of recording device or something to try to catch whoever this is, because I wouldn't even think it's a government problem. I would think it's my superior, and I'd try to get my superior in trouble for this, because how outlandish. Somebody said something and most people don't believe it anyway, but let's go kill the guy? No. And what? I got a job to do, right? I got a job to do where I'm hired to do work. So to instead have me leave for the day to get on an airplane, go somewhere, rent a vehicle, drive to this person's house, knock on their door, see if they're there. Oh, they're not home. Gotta wait. I mean, that is a waste of my time. And that means the stuff that I'm normally paid to do doesn't get done while I'm out here waiting to kill this person. I mean, it's just such a waste of time. It's just such a colossal waste of time. And again, it's not as if these are heavily influential people. These are people that nobody listens to anyway. If you look at just the number of people that believe in conspiracies, it might seem a bit interesting or something to take notice. But once you actually compare it to the percentage, as a percentage of the population, it's actually not that impressive. So overall, with the Men in Black, I mean, could there be aliens that are dressed up as humans showing up to tell people to be quiet and threaten them, and then not actually go through with their threats? I mean, I guess. But does it seem very likely? No. Not based on what I know of the government as this clunky dinosaur still wallowing in paperwork, even though we have everything that can be done digitally now, So it just does not seem very likely to me. And again, that doesn't mean it's not true. It's just, as somebody who actually worked in the government, the first thing I thought when I heard the Men in Black conspiracy was just, who would waste the time? Waste the time and money. Who would even want to do that, Now, some people did bring up in the live stream the Bob Lazar Area 51 documentary on Netflix, and I did watch that. There's two of them, I think, that had Bob Lazar in it. One of them was more about him, and they're very interesting. Bob Lazar does talk about being visited by government personnel. They turned his house upside down, so on and so forth. So in the live stream, I said something like that is a little bit different if it's true. So assuming that it's true and assuming that it happened, that seems likely, because what Bob Lazar had basically said was that there was some sort of element or metal that was being worked on that he had never seen before, and he snuck a piece of it out and started testing it at home for fun. This is stealing government property. This is stealing an experimental property that we're not really sure what it does. Again, assuming everything that he said was accurate, right? So if he would have done that, the government coming and saying, hey man, you can't just take this stuff out, off the base, or out of, this is like security. This is security risk. Yes, they would show up and definitely do something like that. But if it's just some person posting in a Discord channel that's got 100 users and 70% of them don't even show up anyway, you know what I mean? Why are they going to waste their time to do something like that? So it doesn't really make much sense. And even still, I would say that if the Bob Lazar interaction had happened, they would most likely just show up to make sure he didn't sell it to a rival government, more than anything else. So it's for a very practical reason. It doesn't have to do with, oh, just be quiet, we don't want to hear you talking about this UFO stuff. The other thing too is that I've talked about UFO stuff for me in the past, and I will talk about it more because I haven't really talked about it on my channel. I have seen things in the sky that I cannot identify, and as much as I have thought about it, shared the story, can't really figure out what it was. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, it was aliens. I'm not saying, oh, it was a secret government program I stumbled upon. I'm saying I don't know what it was. But every single time I've talked about it, I have never, ever had anybody show up to my house. And so that's another thing to ask yourself, is how come most people that talk about UFOs, or most people that talk about a UFO encounter, or most people that talk about even having claims of being abducted by aliens, how come most of these people do not also talk about the Men in Black? If this was some type of way to silence the discussion on a national level of UFO experiences, the majority of people would have a Men in Black experience if they had a UFO experience, but the majority of people do not. So how do they explain that? I haven't heard anybody who believes in the Men in Black try to explain it. So if you do believe in the Men in Black, maybe you can explain why. Please, if that person does show up, or those people show up, please don't ridicule them. Just listen to what they have to say. Just trying to understand their point doesn't necessarily mean you're agreeing with them, and it's totally fine to ask them questions for follow-up questions as well. But again, the Men in Black is, everybody, I would say, is aware of these claims of UFOs, whether they believe that UFOs are just military testing, whether they believe it's alien visitation or interdimensional travel, or totally made up. I would say most people in the Western world are aware that there is a conspiracy theory that talks about UFOs and aliens. Whether they believe in it or not, they're aware of the conspiracy. If the Men in Black had to deal with it was so closely tied to UFO sightings and discussion thereof, then most of the people would also be aware of this. The Men in Black is so fringe that even most of the people that were in the live stream had never actually heard of it, even though I had mentioned it before and asked before, should we do this video, and was mentioning about making this video. Most of them couldn't even remember it, and had actually said, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, I just know about the movie. But everybody has heard of the UFO conspiracies, so hopefully that kind of makes sense, that if the Men in Black were so closely tied to UFO conspiracies, everybody who knows about the UFO conspiracies would also know about the Men in Black. But that doesn't happen. Why not? It also can have to do with what people understand in popular culture. If the Men in Black conspiracy theory was more well known, I would wager that more people who had a UFO experience and talked about it, believed, dreamed about, or otherwise, as they talked about it, they would also follow it up a few hours later, a few days later, a few weeks later, by saying, hey, I had an encounter with the Men in Black. They wouldn't necessarily have to even lie about it. A lot of times for people who would believe in this, the idea that they could see somebody who appears to be following them, that would be saying, therefore, see, the Men in Black are following me because I was part of this UFO group, or I started talking about UFO stuff. So I think that if the Men in Black conspiracy theory had was more well known, more people who talked about UFO stuff would report it, just because it's more well known. It's kind of in their head. They're going to look for things that fit into that. Sort of like if you pray about something to a god or gods or spirits or ancestors, and you ask for a sign, you're more likely to perceive a sign even where no sign is actually given. And I believe the, mentalist, magician, Darren Brown, did something like that. He told someone that they would be followed around with a camera, and occasionally somebody would pop in, like they were actors in that person's life. They would show up and say something or do something or give some kind of indication that that the person was doing something right, wrong, that they had a learning experience, whatever. And so at the end of the filming, it was like a 2-week thing. Darren Brown said, "Okay, so do you have any idea of any of the interactions that you had for the past 2 weeks that could have been one of our actors trying to influence you?" And the person had explained, "Yes, these are the things that I thought had happened and why I believe that they happened." And Darren Brown had to explain, there were no actors. It was just an idea we put in your head, and because of that idea we put in your head, you perceived that there was all these actors. We also talked in the live stream about how the UFO shape has changed over time because the UFOs in popular culture have changed over time. They used to be this cigar shape, then a saucer shape, a triangle shape. And the same with anyone who had alleged any alien encounters, that also changed with popular culture. When aliens were described in, or shown or portrayed in Pulp Fiction books or in movies as these big monstrous types of things, that's what people would report. They saw this monster get out of this UFO that had landed. But then as these like very thin, large eye, short aliens that we would call the Greys, as that became more known in popular culture, that's what people started to discuss as well when they're talking about, oh yes, I was abducted and I saw them, they had their big heads, they were short, they had large eyes, blah blah blah. So the culture actually really affects our beliefs and perceptions about not just stuff that we see, but stuff we think we saw. It doesn't mean these people are liars. This does not mean that these people are crazy, that they are on drugs or anything like that. But instead it just means that the human brain makes mistakes sometimes. And we can see that actually when we talk about pareidolia. There he is. And for those of you that are not watching and you're just listening, I'm just showing some images of just different things like rocks or water or construction that when you look at it, you kind of see a face. Our brains are really good at seeing patterns, and because of that, sometimes we make mistakes. So we might, I'm sure maybe you've had that happen where you wake up in the middle of the night, especially as a child. You had a nightmare and you see something in the corner of your room that you are so sure is the monster from your dream, the demon from your dream, something like that. And then you turn on the lights and you realize it's a pile of clothes. It doesn't mean that you're just so like having a, you weren't on drugs, right? You're just a little kid. You're not on drugs. It's not that you are out of a sane mind or anything like that. It's that you were scared and you were tired and you were in an area of low light. And those three things together made you perceive a monster, an alien, or what have you in the corner of your room when there was none. People hallucinate when they're tired. People hallucinate when it's dark outside. People hallucinate when they've been working all day and their brain is just kind of fried. You've been studying all day and your brain is just kind of fried. You haven't had time to eat. Excuse me. You haven't had time to eat. You're hungry or you've got too much caffeine. You're going to see things and hear things that aren't there. That's just what the brain does. Again, it doesn't mean that you are a liar, that you're delusional, or any of those words that we would consider with all of that negative baggage to it. It just means that your brain is not firing on all cylinders at that particular moment. It happens to all of us in everyday life. That's just how our brains work. So when that happens, and you believe in UFOs, and you believe in the Men in Black, it's very easy to see how anybody visiting your home or anybody walking by your house could be that way. I mean, even, for example, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as they prefer to be called, or Jehovah's Witnesses coming and knocking on your door. It's two people, most likely white, might look very similar to you, and they show up wearing a type of suit and talking about stuff in the sky. Now, you know they're talking about their religious text, but you could perceive, because you're already in that mindset, that this is a very thinly veiled threat and a thinly veiled discussion about your UFO post that you had made earlier online. I could easily see how something like that could happen if more people believed in the Men in Black conspiracy theory. Or that seeing somebody outside your house, if there's construction going on, or somebody is repairing some type of power lines, that you would say, they're listening in on me, or, yep, this is a type of the Men in Black, or a variant of the Men in Black. It's a government worker who shows up near my house. They might be tapping my phone or something. And when you're already thinking that way, it's very easy to perceive things that might not be there. So it's very important for us to understand what our brains can do and respect that, and to understand we don't know everything, and that our perception might be a bit misguided sometimes. And that doesn't mean that we're wrong, like bad people or immoral people. We're not liars. We're not losing our sanity or anything. It just means that we're human. That's all. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to post it. I would love to hear what you guys have said. Have you guys seen any UFOs? Have you seen any Men in Black, or something that you would perceive that way, or have heard from somebody close to you? So a family member, a friend, a teacher, a coworker, somebody like that. Not, I read about it online somewhere. I'd love to hear more about anybody's perceived encounters, just because they are interesting to me. Otherwise, I will see you guys later, and have a wonderful day. Bye.